Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Dr. UUT lectures. The lecture of today's discussion contains the topic fermentation. We'll talk about the fermentation, we'll talk about its types, lactic acid fermentation, alcoholic fermentation. Along with these two types, we will answer the question that has been asked time and again by the students, that what is the basic difference among the fermentation, the aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration. You guys might know that fermentation is the anaerobic metabolism. It is not the anaerobic respiration. If you don't know, you will get the answer of this question, that why this is called anaerobic metabolism. This is not called anaerobic respiration. You will get the answer of this questions all these all questions. Okay, so these confusions will be cleared, inshallah. Now just concentrate from the very first point. We will talk about the fermentation first. When we clear the fermentation, then we will come to the questions and we will answer all these questions step by step. So just concentrate first of all from the beginning. That is fermentation. So what is fermentation? Simply, fermentation is actually the metabolic process. It is metabolic process in which the food is broken down to release the energy. And remember, during this process, there is no any kind of use of the oxygen. Okay, if there is, that will be very little. So in short, there is no, we can say negligible. If there is negligible amount of oxygen used, we will say that the particular process has got no use of any oxygen. So in metabolism, which one? In the fermentation. And this process, when the food is broken down for the release of the energy, the oxygen is not used. So that's why when oxygen is not used, we use a term anaerobic. An means without, aerobic means air, oxygen. So without oxygen, metabolism is done. If this kind of process is happening, we call this fermentation. Okay, and the point is, we do not call this anaerobic respiration. Okay, don't mix these two, anaerobic metabolism with anaerobic respiration. So now what is the difference between these 2 points? We will get this answer as we come to this particular explanation of the metabolism process. So here we'll get the answer. First of all, just concentrate that this is actually the anaerobic metabolism. This is not anaerobic respiration. Okay, well, now let's come towards the animals and organisms, what they do actually. Microorganisms like bacteria and yeast, they convert glucose, sugar, and other organic compounds into acid, alcohol, or gas. Okay, these are actually the products obtained after the metabolism of the organic compounds. So what they do, bacteria and yeast, they do not need oxygen for this metabolism. So that's why they convert the acid, alcohol, and the gas to these compounds into these three products. Okay, glucose, organic compounds, and sugar, they are broken down, and at the end, either acid or the alcohol or gas can be formed. Okay, the very simple. Now let's explain how the fermentation process takes place and how these bacteria and yeast, etc., they convert the organic compounds into acid, alcohol, or gas. The very first and the beginning point, that is glucose. This is our food. Now this glucose will be broken down. This mechanism, the breaking down mechanism of glucose, is called as glycolysis. What will happen now? During the glycolysis, when the glucose is broken down, there will be the release of the energy and electrons. You know, when something is available with us, when that is broken down, so when you break something, in the meanwhile, there should be the release of something. So that release during the breakdown of the glucose is energy. Along with that, there is electron. So now electron is released and energy is released. So how the energy is released? Simple. During this process of glycolysis, the inorganic phosphate will interact with the ADP, adenosine diphosphate. They will form ATP. Okay. Now this ATP, we know this is energy packet, and this will be very minor sort of energy. We can say two ATPs are actually synthesized hereby. Now this glycolysis turn to the partial mechanism, means partial glycolysis is done. So during this partial glycolysis, only two ATP will be synthesized, which is very less. And what next is happening is, in the meanwhile, electrons are released. Now those electrons, they will be gained by the NAD positive. Okay. Now remember, this process is happening in the cytoplasm of the cell. In the cytoplasm of the cell. Now, guys, there are certain guys, those who don't know about cytoplasm. We have a cell, there is a nucleus, and the fluid surrounding is cytoplasm. Okay. So what is happening? This process is happening in the cytoplasm. NAD will take these electrons and they will be converted into NADH plus H2. So then glucose will be converted into pyruvate now. What happened? Simple. Glucose started glycolysis. Means the glycolysis of the glucose is taking place in the cytoplasm. And what is happening here is the NAD is taking the electrons which are released during the glycolysis of the glucose, and ATP is synthesized. Along with it, glucose is converted into pyruvate. So we got three products. One, two, three. Number one, NADH, H2. Number two, pyruvate. Number three, ATP. Energy, electron carrier, and pyruvate. So now here we have electrons available with this NADH, and here we got ATP, energy, and here we got ATP, pyruvate. Now, this is the very point that you guys must keep in mind if you want to learn the difference among aerobic, anaerobic respiration, and fermentation. This is the point that is supposed to be cleared now. And this must be in your mind now. So just concentrate over here. Now, if pyruvate gets interacted with enzymes, the process will shift to fermentation. And what else is happening hereby is this NADH is going to play the game hereby. Now, first of all, let's clear the fermentation, then we will come towards the respirations like aerobic and anaerobic respiration. When pyruvate is interacting with lactate dehydrogenase, this is this kind of enzyme, what will happen? Pyruvate will take these NADH and H2, they will convert pyruvate into lactic acid in the presence of this enzyme. So what happened here by NADH plus H2, they will give back the electrons to these pyruvate. They will convert back into NAD positive. Here it is NAD positive, NAD plus. So this NAD plus will come back. They will take more electrons during the glycolysis. So if there is release of the electrons during the glycolysis, those will be taken back again by the NAD, and they will be converted back into NADH and H2. Got? Plus. So what is happening hereby? Electrons are given to the pyruvate, and pyruvate is converted into lactic acid in the presence of lactate dehydrogenase. So this is the point. If NADH gives its electrons to the pyruvate in the very beginning step of the metabolic process, so this will be called as fermentation. And if the product is lactic acid, this will be called as lactic acid fermentation. I hope this is clear now. Guess what? If glycolysis takes place, NADH is produced plus H2 plus pyruvate plus ATP. These three things are produced. And in the meanwhile, pyruvate is interacting with another enzyme, that is decarboxylase. Now the name indicates D means removal, carbo means carbon dioxide, A is enzyme. Such kind of enzymes which are removing the carbon dioxide from the pyruvate. So when now these enzymes, they will interact with this and they will release 2 carbon dioxide from here, and they will form another structure from the pyruvate, that is acetaldehyde. Now this acetaldehyde, this has got the ability to accept the electron from the NADH. Now here we had NADH, okay? These NADH will give the electrons to the acetaldehyde, and like this they will be converted back into NAD positive. Now this NAD positive is again available. They will come back to the process, that is during the glycolysis they will take more electron. Like this they will be providing electron hereby. They will be taking electron from here, from the glycolysis, and they will be providing those electrons to the acetaldehyde to convert this acetaldehyde into alcohol. Which one? Ethanol. So now here what is happening? Electrons are released during the glycolysis process, and those electrons are gained by the acetaldehyde, which is the immediate product after the pyruvate. So hereby again electrons are given to the acetaldehyde, the immediate product during the pyruvate. So if this kind of happening is happening, that immediate electrons are provided very immediate to the very immediate products, or to the very immediate pyruvate. So immediate pyruvate and immediate products like acetaldehyde. So there is no any kind of prolongation of the process. Very shortcut mechanisms are actually seen hereby. So electrons are released, products are formed, pyruvate and acetaldehyde, and then they gain electrons and they convert the pyruvate into lactic acid and acetaldehyde into alcohol. So if alcohol is synthesized, this mechanism is called as alcoholic fermentation. I hope you got this concept. So during the glycolysis, if the electrons are produced, energy is produced, and pyruvate is produced. Now, if these electrons are used by these pyruvate, which is the very immediate product after the glucose breakdown, so they will form lactic acid. And if the electrons are used by the pyruvate and the very next immediate product, that is acetaldehyde, if that accepts these electrons and makes the alcohol, so these mechanisms will be called as fermentation. These will be called as fermentation. Now let's come towards the very confusing portion, that is the respiration, aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration. Now how they are different, though they also involve the glycolysis. There is also the breakdown of the food for the release of the energy, and even there is enough high energy release. Now, what makes the difference over here? That is actually very simple. Concentrate here. NADH. The game changer is this NADH. This is responsible to do the entire gaming or entire conversion of the uh, concepts. So if NADH is giving electron to the pyruvate, the immediate product, then this will lead towards the fermentation. If this NADH is providing electron to some where else, to the oxygen during these mechanisms. So what is happening thereby in other processes, in other metabolic processes, glucose is broken down to pyruvate. Then pyruvate enters to electron transport chain, which is another system which we have discussed in our other earlier videos. So what we studied thereby was actually glucose was not going to give its electron to the pyruvate directly. So during the glycolysis, electrons were produced, but they were not given to the pyruvate directly. They were just given to the end product, that was actually oxygen. Now here we have the product, that is lactic acid, or pyruvate, or acetaldehyde. So in those cases, when there was the use of oxygen, so electrons were given very lately. They were actually transported in the electron transport chain, and by the end, the electrons were provided to the oxygen. So that's why that was actually a kind of a long chain process, and that was providing enough high energy. And the end product was actually oxygen, because of which then the process was named as, then that metabolic process was named as aerobic respiration. Why? Because one thing was that there was oxygen in use, and another thing was the NADH, which was actually responsible to give its electron very late, but to the oxygen. So if NADH is giving electron to the oxygen, then the mechanism is called as aerobic respiration. And if NADH is giving electron to some different things like nitrate and sulfate, if these are receiving the electrons of the NADH, then the mechanism, then the process will be called as the anaerobic respiration. And if the NADH is giving electrons to the immediate products of the glycolysis, pyruvate and acetaldehyde, the mechanism will be called as fermentation. So let make me this easy once again, or to make it this in one shot. That is, what is the difference among anaerobic respiration, aerobic respiration, and fermentation? The very simple and the very basic difference is actually that is being made by NADH, which is having electron with itself. If this gives electron to the very immediate products of the glycolysis, like pyruvate, so what will happen? Lactic acid will be synthesized and the alcohol will be synthesized. Which one? Ethanol. Process will be called as fermentation, lactic acid fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. And if this NADH does not give its electron, it undergoes a process of a very long chain mechanism. It enters the electron transport chain, and a very lengthy process takes place, and the electrons are given to the oxygen at the end of the day. So if NADH is giving its electron to the oxygen, the process will be called as aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. If oxygen is receiving the electrons if received by the oxygen, the process is called as aerobic respiration. And if these NADH electrons, they are given to somewhat have different things like nitrate and sulfate, so the process will be called as respiration, but the anaerobic respiration. Why? Because oxygen is not involved here. So this is the very difference. I hope you got the difference among the fermentation, aerobic respiration, and anaerobic respiration. And I hope you will not make the mistake again. It is confusing mixing the anaerobic metabolism with the anaerobic respiration. That's it all. If still you have any question, you can ask us in the comment box. And thank you for watching. Don't forget sharing it with your friends and heroes.